How's that sounding?
Ooh, it's like a whole new person.
Oh, well, it's not a new person. It's still me, but we did buy a new microphone. Apparently, I've not checked the Discord in a while. You know how I feel about checking Twitter DMs or Discord tags or, any other form of social media, email, pretty much anything other than somebody directly replying to me on Twitter. I just
Oh
kind
yeah.
of usually don't get around to it. But I heard that there were a lot of complaints about the microphone quality. So we used some of this podcast money that's been rolling in, thanks to the support of our sponsors, Fansided, and listeners like you. Just invested that right back into the podcast. Got myself a new microphone. And at this point, if you've got any complaints, sorry guys, this is just how I sound. Welcome into It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on Twitter at RealBirdLawyer. Don't DM me. Just at me. I will respond to 100% of people that reply to me on Twitter. If you tag me or at me anywhere else, probably won't do it. Here with me, as always, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Wit on Twitter.com, X.com, whatever it is. What's going on, buddy?
Now I know this isn't your fault. That's just who you are as a person, and that's great. But people know that if they can't get a hold of you,
Yeah.
there is someone that does respond to DMs, that
Yeah.
does respond to everywhere else.
Yeah.
And I become your de facto secretary.
Yeah.
And it's fine because most of the time, if they're trying to hit you up about something and then they come to me, that means it's like podcast related. So I'm like also invested and I'm fine with replying back to him or doing whatever. But every now and then someone will just be like, "Hey, Bird Lawyer's not answering his DMs. Can you ask him some law question?" And I'm like, "Nah, dude, no, that's not how this works at all. I will never do that. So don't try it."
Great use of de facto, by the way. We're brought to you by Fansided, as I mentioned, paying the bills and upgrading our equipment. So that's great. We got a great show for you guys today. We've got news. We've got the next great American dynasty rebounding from the last loss of this project. We're recapping every game of the Patrick Mahomes era. We just did the Bengals last week. If you did not check out that episode, check it out. We definitely took that one on the chin, but we had fun with it. So, I mean, we definitely did not shirk the entire point of the exercise and just roast the Bengals for 45 minutes. That definitely did not happen. So
No way. We'd never do
give
that.
we would never do that. So if you have not listened to that episode, just give that a quick whirl. And then we've got a quick conversation with friend of the pod, Charles Goldman, just catching up on him on all things offseason related. Chiefs wrapping up camp. So that will be a great one. But first, so I'm not in market. So this is something that's flown a little bit under the radar for me. I'm aware that it's going on, but it's maybe not a story that I followed incredibly closely. Kansas trying to steal the Chiefs away from Missouri. They pass a star bond this week to attract the Chiefs to the Kansas side of the border when the Chiefs lease is up in 2031. And I was a little bit surprised. We had a conversation off the air. You asked me to put a percentage on this. And, just based on kind of what I've been soaking up by osmosis through, people I follow on Twitter and everything like that, I assume that, the odds of this happening were somewhere right around like 50%, right? That this bill got passed. Sure, Kansas is trying to steal the Chiefs away, but there's still, a very good chance that it won't happen. And apparently that's not the situation. So why don't you fill me in on this?
No, obviously it's a fluid situation and things can, if Missouri comes to the table with some awesome offer or something, then things can change. But as it currently stands, I get the feeling based on local reporting and people that are really following this thing closely that it's more like 80 or 90% likely that the Chiefs and the Royals end up in Kansas by 2031. And the whole sticky situation. Obviously, the vote that was passed or that didn't pass in April for the Jackson County sales tax or 3/8% tax, whatever they ended up trying to do. That was a big uh, impetus for this whole thing to happen. And if they had passed that, then I think everyone would have just moved on. Life would have been great, and the Chiefs and Royals would have felt that they had a long-term home. And when that didn't happen, Kansas smelled blood in the water. They saw an opportunity to add, two big time professional sports franchises. These are not small, I mean, an NFL and an MLB team are as big as it gets, and Kansas wants that. And the whole Star Bond thing is a much easier vehicle for them to finance these teams than what Missouri has available to them. Missouri does not have Star Bonds, and they would have to get cities involved and be heavily like part of the municipality taxes and stuff like it has a lot more like red tape and governmental approval and stuff like that for Missouri to pay for it for a new stadium or for whatever it is that they're trying to do. And Kansas can just say, we're going to pass these Star Bonds, and Star Bonds are paid for by whatever businesses and sales tax get generated by the incoming. It could be for any, like the Speedway did Star Bonds. It doesn't necessarily have to be for a stadium, but in this case, it would be like a giant domed big time sports complex in Kansas that would then be, funded by these Star Bonds. Now, not fully. The Chiefs would still have to pay privately, but they'd have to pay privately if they built another place in Missouri or something. So that's not really part of the equation. It's a crazy situation. I also did not, I mean, like you, before about this week, I knew it was like a possibility, like you said, about a coin flip or so, but really reading boots on the ground this week, I'm starting to think that this thing is like all but done.
Well, let's not forget, in addition to Missouri not having the Star Bond issue, Missouri tried to legalize sports betting last year,
Yes,
and
that's a big deal.
it did not pass the Missouri House. And part of what Kansas is doing to fund this whole project is the revenue that they're generating from legalized sports betting. And
Yes.
Missouri is stuck in the dark ages. And
Yeah.
listen, it's no secret that you're a Jayhawk. I self-identify as a Kansan. I was born in Missouri. I grew up there for 6 years. I moved to the Kansas side.
Never looks back.
That's where I got my first driver's license. And now I live in Colorado, but I would self-identify as a Kansan, a Missourian by birth, but a Kansan by the grace of God. We're not letting our birth rights here preclude us from providing unbiased
Not at
testimony
all.
about this whole situation. I mean, Missouri has fumbled the bag super hard in this situation. We obviously, and I don't want to discount the possibility that the Chiefs have a role and a motive in pushing this towards it, because it sort of felt like when we were discussing the vote to extend the 3/8 tax in Jackson County, that it really felt like the Chiefs' proposal was wildly unimpressive. And I'm not discounting the possibility that the Chiefs sort of sabotage that vote to sort of bring this situation about, right? Because this
Right.
is potentially a much better situation for them. I mean, if this all plays out, frankly, for Missouri to keep the Chiefs at this point, they're going to have to come up with a solution that can't help but be good for the Chiefs. I mean, like at this point, they're being wooed by
Yeah.
both sides of the state line
Need to
here,
go for some
and
wood.
that can only benefit the Chiefs. So they've placed themselves in this situation, but Missouri still has some time, obviously, to come back to the table and work on keeping the Chiefs in Kansas City and presumably in Arrowhead.
Right.
But boy, they have a lot of work to do.
And as you said, even though I am a Jayhawk, and when it comes to like sports rivalries and stuff, yeah, obviously I'm gonna root for Kansas over Missouri. But I don't think anybody involved in this is really like super thrilled about the idea of, I mean, I'm sorry, not anybody involved. Certainly Kansas legislators are very thrilled about this. But what I mean is the fans of the team, I'm a huge, huge, huge Chiefs fan. I identify more as a Chiefs fan than a Jayhawk at this point.
Right,
And, I don't want to see them leave Arrowhead. Like
right, right,
it's home. And
right.
and at least we can all fall back on this idea that at least if the Chiefs are forced out of Arrowhead, it's going to be still in the metro area, and that's not as hard. I mean, not nearly as hard of a pill to swallow as if they relocated. I mean,
Right,
a
right.
relocation is a just a absolute the worst thing that can happen to a sports fan,
And it's happened a
and
lot to Missouri.
and
It's
Missouri
state of
just
Missouri.
keeps losing sports teams. They lose mostly from St. Louis. Every now and then a team
That's
does leave
understandable.
from Kansas City, Missouri, but pretty much every professional sports team other than the St. Louis Cardinals has left Missouri. They're just it's a shithole, and they the fact that the Chiefs are in this position and the Royals, we're a Chiefs podcast, we're focused more on the Chiefs, but the Royals are clearly, they wanted to move downtown. And when that didn't pass, I mean, I'm sure they were as pissed off about that as anybody. And so now, they're going to take their ball and go somewhere else. And they're going to walk across the border and they're going to still have all their fans. I mean, make no mistake, anybody that worries about attendance or momentum for the franchise, like for the Chiefs, let's say the Chiefs go out and over the next 7 years, when they still have Patrick Mahomes and they go win 2 or 3 more Super Bowls in that stretch, they're still going to be the top team in the NFL by the time 2031 rolls around. I think that's, seems pretty likely at this point. I'm not guaranteeing it, and then if that's the case and they move to Kansas, I mean, not a damn thing's going to change as far as the attendance or any of that. It's not going to impact the product on the field. It's all just about who benefits financially from the Chiefs' existence. And that's going to move from Missouri to Kansas. It feels like it's crazy.
I would hate to see Arrowhead fall, obviously. And,
Yeah.
when we sort of talked about the vote, I mean, we expressed our opinions on Kauffman too. I mean, it's the same situation with Kauffman. The Truman Sports Complex is in not the best area, and it can be it doesn't generate any revenue outside of the games and people coming to
Right.
the games. But those stadiums are I mean, they are home for us.
Iconic.
They're iconic. We both have, and millions and millions of fans have so many memories attached to those places, and that part of it would be really sad. That being said, wouldn't mind giving 35-year-old Patrick Mahomes a dome
Don't. Yeah,
to
I know
protect
it.
him to protect
I
him from
know
that
it.
harsh Midwestern winter. We don't need 35-year-old Patrick Mahomes out there in negative 30-degree weather. That's all I'm
No,
saying. We
no.
don't.
Let the
We don't need
young
it.
guys do that. I mean, that's going to be old man's going to have 6 rings or whatever, and is going to be like, I want to play my home games in a dome. You're absolutely right. One thing that Quentin Lucas said recently on one of the sports radio channels was that one major reason for him to really, really want to see the team stay in, or at least the Chiefs stay in Arrowhead, is he's like, what a black eye on Missouri if Arrowhead and Kauffman are to be vacated.
Yeah.
Like that whole area
Yeah.
just becomes this pit of sadness. Like,
Yeah. Light.
or are you going to spend, $20 million knocking down both stadiums or whatever it would be? Or are you just going to, like, whatever they're going to do out there? It's definitely not going to, no one's going to go there ever again. Like
Right.
it's not going to be, it doesn't bring anything in if those two teams leave, and it'll just be a sad reminder. You could see them off the highways and stuff, and like it would just be another example of a professional sports team leaving Missouri for greener pastures. And he was like, that to me, as much as the economics, he's like, I'm a mayor, as much as that part of it is a big deal to me, just the pride aspect of them leaving is rough.
Yeah. Absolutely. Speaking of pride, things that are rough, and clown shows, let's transition here to Mike Florio, continuing to be clown himself regarding Rashid Rice. So, an article came out in Pro Football Talk. I gave it a click so that you don't have to, dear listener. Last week, Mike Florio reminded everyone that they reported back in whenever it was April, March or April, that Rashid Rice had some off-field issues at SMU. So to remind you, again, to save you the click of what Pro Football Talk posted actually on May 10th, multiple teams learned during the pre-draft process about an alleged incident involving Rice while he was at SMU. Rice believed former SMU basketball player Kendrick Davis was seeing Rice's girlfriend. Rice and some of his friends, per the specific information gathered by at least one team, went to an SMU basketball game. Rice or someone with him, per the specific information gathered by at least one team, fired multiple bullets into the empty car belonging to Kendrick Davis. Now, why is this coming back up now? Because let me ask you this. Has there been anything to substantiate this information? Have there been any charges filed relating to this? Has any of this come up at all except for in Mike Florio's fantasy world? No. But because Mike Florio built up decades of goodwill before turning into the parody of himself that he is today, he was able to ask Andy Reid about this situation. And this is what Andy said. The way I'd leave it with you is we knew enough to draft him, and then we just went with the process and we found that it was satisfactory for us. When asked to elaborate on his comments, Andy said, I'll probably leave it right there. Yeah, I'll leave it right there for you. There you go. There you go. Listen, it's not a yes, we heard this same rumor, and we got to call it what it is, right? Like this is
Yes.
not something that's been remotely confirmed. It is we heard one team heard this story, right? Like
Right.
that's it. That at least one team heard that this incident happened. It could have been Rice, it could have been someone with him, and they may have shot bullets at an empty car. Like this is one of those stories that, and this would have come out right around the time, obviously, that the second incident with Rashid came out, which has since resulted in no charges
Nothing.
being filed. Yeah, with
Yeah.
the photographer situation. It's a rabble rouser continuing to rabble rouse. And thankfully, our coach was not here for it, just putting all of that to bed in a way that only a 20 plus year veteran NFL head coach like Andy Reid can.
Yeah, it's like a fourth hand story. It's Florio heard that a team heard that a story that this happened. I mean, it's just such a grapevine bullshit. Classic Florio, classic 2020s Florio, really, classic last couple years. And Andy's kind of made a little bit of a history of proving Florio wrong, like
Yeah,
outright.
right.
Like Florio comes out with a story about Andy retiring, and Andy immediately signs an extension and says he's going to be. I mean, like I just feel that Florio keeps trying to come at the Chiefs, and he keeps missing, and it pisses him off, and he tries and tries and
Yeah,
tries
he
again.
just wants to come again, and
He just
he
wants to
misses
keep coming
again. And
ever since Tyreek Hill. And that was the
yeah,
day that everything changed for Florio and the Chiefs. And from that, he sounded like a fool because he said, if Tyreek Hill plays another down in the NFL, I'm retiring. And
yeah,
then, of course, Tyreek Hill wasn't even suspended.
right.
And Florio went right on with his job like a fucking asshole.
Yeah,
And ever since then, and every time he tweets something, a bunch of Chiefs fans, rightfully so, will reply to him with, I thought you were supposed to retire. And so he probably just worked up this ill will towards the Chiefs. And like, I'm just so over him. I'm over him coming out with stories like this with nothing to back it up. All the stuff about not just Andy retiring, oh, the Mahomes extension stuff. He was completely off base and early on that stuff. And like he just doesn't know what he's talking about anymore.
in the legal business, which Mike Florio was in before he turned to the business, quote unquote, of covering the NFL. And in fact, I would put all of those words each
Yeah.
individually, business, covered,
uh,
NFL, etc., in air quotes. We would call this whole, situation hearsay is what we would call it. And
sure.
hearsay, for you non-lawyers out there, not admissible in a court of law. And in fact, this isn't really even hearsay. As you said, there's layers to this. This is like hearsay within hearsay within hearsay.
Yeah.
Definitely not admissible. All right. Let's just put this to one side until Mike brings it up back into our lives during another slow new week in the NFL, and then we'll vent a little bit one more time. Really quickly, an injury update. Joe Thuney, who obviously was injured in the playoffs, was not able to finish the Chiefs' Super Bowl run, is going to be back for the start of the regular season. According to Andy Reid, they are optimistic that he will be able to play week one, but he is on the border as to whether he'll be back for the start of training camp. So we'll keep an eye on that. But it's good to hear that he's progressing. And lest we forget, I mean, this was the guy that was pushing to play in the Super Bowl with the torn pec or whatever it was that he had. It was torn pec, torn bicep. I can't remember which one it was, but he was pushing to play with an insane injury that literally no offensive lineman should ever be able to play with. And I think actually did play a couple of snaps in that game before he came out. So it's not surprising to hear that he is working his way back, but obviously hoping for a speedy recovery for Big Joe.
I don't believe he did play in that game because there was like I was doing a search on players that actually got snaps in Super Bowls and got rings because there's a difference between just getting a ring and actually playing in the
Oh, I
game and
meant
getting
I
a
meant
ring.
after he got the injury, not in the Super Bowl.
Oh, yes, you're
Yeah,
right. He tried to keep going in the AFC Championship game.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes. Yeah, and then of course missed the Super Bowl. It's crazy that the Chiefs won the Super Bowl without arguably the best left guard in football. I mean, what a just an embarrassment of riches the Chiefs have.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. That's going to do it for the news. let's get to the Next Great American Dynasty. For those of you who are not familiar with this program, first of all, get with it because we've been doing this now for like 2 months, but we are recapping every playoff game in the Patrick Mahomes era. Some of these are games that we've recapped before. Some of them were games that we were revisiting for the first time. And now we have gotten into a stretch of games where we were well established in the podcast game by the time, we got to this game, the first playoff game of the 2022 season. It's the Chiefs taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars coming to Kansas City in the divisional round game. And before we get into the Chiefs system, kind of what we do with this game, we kind of have to establish how we got here. Now, as I already mentioned, we absolutely 100% took accountability for the Bengals loss last week. And
Yeah, it was
if you
tough.
want a lesson in how to handle accountability, how to face the music after a tough loss, definitely check that podcast out because that is definitely what we did. And we definitely did not dodge that to roast the Bengals for 45 minutes. So definitely check that out. Giving myself a pat on the back and you a pat on the back as well for our manly accountability and
It was
just
hard, but we had to do it.
just sort of general fortitude in addressing that difficult situation. Fortunately, we're back to recapping a win this week. Spoiler alert, there's not another loss on the calendar for the rest of the summer. The Next Great American Dynasty is all dubs from here to the end of this project, which is amazing for us. But before we get into this one and the run to the final two Super Bowl rings, let's talk about kind of how we got here. And so, as I mentioned, Chiefs lost to the Bengals in overtime at the end of the 2021 playoff run, came into 2022 on what can only be described as a downward trajectory. Let's just call it what it is, right? They lost the Super Bowl in 2020 to Tampa, got blown out a couple of times in the regular season, really struggled through that 2022 regular season or 2021 regular season after that
Right.
loss to the to Tampa in the Super Bowl. Made it back to the AFC Championship game because that's just what the Chiefs do every year. Had a huge lead in that game at halftime. Couldn't convert on the touchdown to Tyreek Hill right before half. Collapsed in the second half. Worst half of Patrick Mahomes' professional football career. And then lost the game in overtime. And then, as if that didn't sting enough, 2 months later, when the rest of the AFC was spending literally billions of dollars in free agency
Literally.
to come at the Kings, the Chiefs traded away superstar wide receiver Tyreek Hill, and there were all these questions about how the Chiefs were going to adjust without him. I mean, it did not feel good to lose the AFC Championship game. It felt worse to then trade away the cheetah.
It was as big of a gut punch of a transaction as I've ever felt as a sports fan. I mean, that trade, we pretty funny enough recapped our G chat on the pod like during the trade as we were finding out what was going on, and it was just this harrowing like hour and a half of like, oh my God, did you see this rumor? Oh my God, he's gone. Like it was it
Yeah.
was it was as fast as Tyreek Hill to when it
Yeah,
happened.
it
And
was.
yeah, I mean, you know, I always kind of had a problem with people that tried or successfully dunked on the entire sports media world for saying how are the Chiefs going to handle not having Tyreek
Sure.
Hill? Because
Yeah.
like, of
Yeah.
course that was the question.
Yeah, that
Like
was a legitimate concern.
it was the most legitimate concern you could have about this team. I mean, and so yes, they got it figured out. Yes, they got it done, but like let's be honest. We were all thinking it. Whether you are one of those people that tweeted like I can't believe anyone doubted this team, what no, everyone was doubting the team for a right reason.
Yeah, and so of course the Chiefs would function very well without Tyreek Hill. They
Yeah,
tie a franchise record with 14 wins in the 2022 regular season. They drop 3 games only to the Bills, the Colts in that weird, strange,
bullshit
awful
game.
game, and of course the dastardly Bengals who moved to 3-0 against Patrick Mahomes with Joe Burrow at their quarterback. Nevertheless, the Chiefs still easily secured the number one seed after Damar Hamlin died on the field in the Bills-Bengals game and prevented from that game being played. So the Bills were never able to make up their game back in the standings. The Chiefs get the bye. They roll in the divisional round completely healthy, ready to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, by the way, had the week before performed the third largest comeback in NFL playoff history after the hapless Los Angeles Chargers spotted them a 27-0 lead and then blew it in a way that only the Chargers can. And so here we are. What a season.
Man, it was wild. I mean, let's not also forget Patrick Mahomes had an MVP season in 2022. I mean, he was unbelievable this whole
Sure
year.
did.
And it was such a relief to see this team. Now, they did not come out just because they won all these games. They didn't come out and look the same. Of course, they didn't have
Sure,
Tyreek
of
Hill.
course.
And so they had to kind of rethink some stuff. And fortunately, we also we're going to get to the point now. We're already at that point where we're kind of rehashing a lot of our talking points from this point in the pod, but that's kind of what we're doing when we're looking back. But the team was shown what life like without Tyreek Hill was going to be like while they still had Tyreek Hill by virtue of these two high shells that everyone was running, because they took away, if nobody had figured out how to stop the deep game by the Chiefs, and the Chiefs were just lobbing up 60-yard touchdowns to Tyreek every game, and then you pull the rug out and take him away, I think that transition would have been really, really hard. But instead, the Chiefs had played small ball, had played dink and dunk for a season and a half, starting when everybody started this after the Tampa game. And now by the time they got rid of Tyreek, they were like, all right, I guess, it was nice. It was obviously very nice to have the cheetah around and to stretch the field, but we're kind of figuring out that everyone was already playing us like this while we had Tyreek Hill. So they've got a good game plan for this type of underneath stuff. So it was a banner year for the Chiefs offense. They led the league in scoring. Mahomes was unbelievable and obviously, as I said, MVP. And they life without Tyreek Hill, it moved on just fine.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily as exciting, but it was still extremely good. We have to talk about really quick before we get into what happened in this game, what happened in the game earlier this season when the Chiefs hosted the Jags, because it was
Yeah,
really weird. The
yeah,
Jags came out with an onside kick, which they recovered. They ended up with essentially three more possessions than the Chiefs, which is essentially impossible due
yeah.
to the onside kick, the timing of halftime, and then a fumbled kickoff return by the Chiefs, where they didn't even get a drive because they did not, they didn't possess the football at the end of the kickoff.
Yeah, if
And
you think
yet,
about a kickoff fumble is like an onside kick.
yeah,
Team kicks,
exactly.
team
Right.
recovers. I mean, that's basically no different. So they basically got two onside kicks in this.
Right. And yet the Chiefs still comfortably won this game 27-17. Kadarius Toney making his Chiefs debut in style, dominating the Jags. Probably his best game as a Chief, arguably. Some might
Certainly.
say. Sources are saying.
Certainly. Other than
The
maybe Super Bowl
Sure.
57. But
Yeah. Yeah.
this is pretty close.
The Jags fall to 3-7 after this loss, but fortunately for them, they played in the AFC South and they won six of their last seven games. So they ended up winning the division and obviously then performing that incredible comeback over the hapless Chargers to make it back to Arrowhead for the rematch. What were you expecting from the Jags?
I was expecting a fight. I went to this game. Shout out to our guy True Green Thumb for hooking it up with the tickets. That was a lot of fun going to the game with him, Kaka. And I mean the Jags were hot, as you said. Won 6 out of 7. They had a number one overall pick at quarterback that seemed to be really, really hitting his stride in that offense. They had Doug Peterson, who knew the Chiefs very well, obviously. Um, they were nasty. They had Travis Etienne, they had Christian Kirk, and I mean they had the players and they had Josh Allen on defense, the best Josh Allen in the NFL. And
Mm-hmm.
I definitely thought that if the Chiefs were to go toe to toe with this team that in 10 games, let's say, I think the Chiefs would probably win 6 or 7 of them, which is fine. And the Chiefs are the best team in football at this period. So, but it's definitely not a pushover. It's definitely not a team that I felt like, all right, they're the Jags, easy, let's just get it done. I mean, they were a tough squad.
Absolutely. Well, are you ready for the
Let's
Chief
do the Chiefs
system?
system. Let's do it. So, of course, this is the system that the Chiefs follow when they win football games. It is an acronym: create drama, handle adversity, inspire hope, engage physically, finish strong, and separate entirely. It is takes its homage from the Dennis system in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And of course, we start out with create drama. All these games are playoff games that we've been doing. So the create drama typically it comes baked in to all these recaps.
Definitely.
But in this one, the game starts out with a little bit of drama too. So a 3-and-out by the defense opens the game, and what followed is one of the most
Mm.
surgical, easy, better than you drives that the Chiefs have ever shown in the Mahomes era, which is an incredibly high bar.
Yeah.
They start off with a first down run to Pacheco for 12 yards, and then a pass to Kelsey for 7, back to Kelsey for 14, Pacheco for 5, Juju for 13, Kadarius Toney for 9, and like a jillion missed tackles. I mean, he immediately was like, "Oh yeah, these guys, I know these guys. I can torch them." And
Yeah.
then it was 2nd and 1. Jerick McKinnon, easy 5 yards for a first down. And then the Jags had too many men on the field and called a timeout, which prompted Chris Collinsworth to crack. I don't blame him at all because everyone could just sense how this game was beginning. I mean, it was 6 or 7 plays in, and the Jags looked like they weren't even playing defense. And then they did finally get some pressure after that timeout. Mahomes had to dump it out of bounds for his first incomplete of the whole game. And then Pacheco goes for 4 to set up a 3rd and 6. Mahomes gets a couple guys on him, shrugs them off, dances around a little bit between a couple Jags defenders, slings it right on a dime to Kelsey over the middle for the first down to the 8-yard line. Really vintage Mahomes to Kelsey on that one. Their connection was
Hmm.
apparent. It was just very much like you could tell, like the fire was lit. And then Mahomes goes right back to Kelsey over the middle, basically no one around him, walks into the end zone, early 7-0 lead. Now, I detailed that drive more than I typically do on these recaps because I just remember how many people, including us, remarked after this game that when the Chiefs came out on offense, and that was as sharp as they've ever looked. That was as good, as easy, as effective, as overpowering. Before I get into the actual drama of create drama, I know you remember this drive well. What were you thinking during this part?
Oh, it was such a pleasure to go back and watch this drive because for me, this is sort of like the peak. Like if you take it down to one drive,
Yeah.
just one drive, and you ask me like what is the best drive of the Patrick Mahomes Chiefs era, it it's this. It's just it was
Pretty
so
damn good.
like it just no matter what the Jags did, whether they got pressure, whether they didn't get pressure, whether they forced him off his spot, whether they dropped back and tried to play coverage, they did a lot of different things on this drive and nothing worked. And he had answers to everything that they were doing. And, you mentioned it. I mean, some of it was just vintage 2018 Patrick Mahomes, the schoolyard scramble,
Right.
where he's running around and making plays. Some of it was the 2022 regular
Yeah.
season MVP Patrick Mahomes, where he's just completely surgical assassin Tom Brady in the pocket Mahomes. And this was like, I mean, this was like seeing what a fully healthy playoff Patrick Mahomes at the height of his powers looked like. And,
Yeah.
it was like, he wasn't healthy in the 2019 Super Bowl run. Obviously, he had blown out his knee in Denver midway through that season. He
And
was
he had the
dealing with
toe
the
issue.
he was dealing with the toe issue that year. He was dealing with the toe issue the next year, and then
Right. Right.
in 20 the year before that, he had some health issues as well. I mean, he
I think it was an
basically
ankle again in 21, if I remember right.
yeah,
Like,
that's right, that's right.
yeah, it's hard for Patrick Mahomes to go through a playoff run healthy, and this was what it looked like.
This
And
is what it looked like,
not
and it looked just. I mean,
it
it's
was
the best
perfect.
movie I've ever seen.
Yes, and not only was he healthy, but like the team was clicking and they had answers and they had playmakers. They had guys that were able to catch the ball and they were dialing up the right stuff. I mean, everyone was in sync on offense and the line was protecting well. And I mean, the running game, Pacheco looked good. Like you really just couldn't find a weakness with this Chiefs offense. And you know, I mean, all good things have to come to an end. And so part B for creating drama, the Jags answered right back when their super, super excellent return man, Jamal Agnew, took the kickoff 63 yards. And then they had a 20-yard run by Etienne and a 10-yard touchdown pass to Christian Kirk. Just like that, the game was all square, but the drama that was created was far from done. What follows next, I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. It's one of the darkest moments in the Mahomes era, right
Mm.
after what you just described as like the best that the offense has ever looked. With 2:39 to go in the first quarter, I got a little shiver. Patrick Mahomes
Mm.
completes a pass to Blake Bell. Jags linebacker slash hitman Arden Key falls down hard on Mahomes' ankle. Just really comes down, pulls it. We all know what comes next: the screaming, the pleading, the crying. We were all doing it. We were all in really, really bad shape. And for Mahomes, he limped to the sideline. The Chiefs call timeout. He goes over to the bench. We've all now seen the behind the scenes stuff from quarterback. He gets back out there. They after at the end of the timeout with Henny warming up, Mahomes trots back out there, and I mean you could just see the pain. He was limping. He did a left-handed handoff to McKinnon to try and I mean the way that he was dropping back was completely
Yeah.
affected. The drive stalled. He had a couple handoffs and stuff, but really couldn't really make much happen. Threw an incomplete on third down where the ball basically just spiked into the ground. I mean, he was all discombobulated. And Butker, for his part, walks out there and nails a 50-yard field goal in a 7-7 game to make it 10-7 Chiefs. And that was a big kick, and we're used to that out of Harry. But all attention was on the most important right ankle in the kingdom. Drama successfully created.
Hmm. I mean, it's almost hard to even like it's only dramatic because we know what's going to happen, right? Like otherwise it would
Yeah.
just be create catastrophe, create disaster, whatever you want to
Cry.
call it, or cry. Literally, if you change it to any of those things, because
Yeah.
it's only dramatic because we know how the story ends. At the time, it was obviously a horrible situation. I know
Horrible.
you had a great view of all of this going
Yeah.
on,
Did.
because you were down on the Chiefs and
Close.
pretty close to the
Yeah.
sideline. Uh, I mean, what was the what was it like being in the stadium with a essentially a front row seat to what was going on the sideline?
I mean, obviously horrifying. And there's this element of wanting to know what's going on when you're in a stadium when something like that happens. We remember it from the Denver game where so
Right.
I was at the Denver game and this game. So I
Right.
know now look, I've also been to tons of other games and he's been healthy, so I'm not saying it's my fault, but what I mean is that I've been in attendance when Mahomes is seriously hurt twice. And there's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can find out. You're on your phone, you're trying to, people are the hard part about it is I'm so close, but it's not like I can hear anything they're saying. So like I
Right.
might as well have been more disconnected from it than someone that was just watching on TV where you could hear a sideline reporter say something or you're on Twitter or
Got better
whatever the
cell
case may be.
service. Yeah,
Yes,
right. In my
exactly.
house
Right.
than you
So I
do in
mean
the stadium.
I couldn't have been further away from information when I was 7 rows up or whatever it was on the 50-yard line. And I was I mean I went through a lot of like convincing myself he'll be okay. He went out, so the fact that he went out a couple plays into, I mean, they took a timeout and then he went back out there, and the fact that he immediately went back out there, I was like, well, if it was broken, he
Right.
wouldn't have been able to do that. He wouldn't be able to walk on it right now if it was broken. But clearly the hobbling and the limping and the screaming and all the stuff he was doing, like it's not like he just went out there again and was okay. Like he clearly was not okay, but the doctors didn't tell him, hey, your foot's falling off, you can't come out. So I mean it was harrowing. I hated
But Andy Reid did tell him that he had to go back and get it checked
it.
out.
It
And
did.
we all saw on the NFL Films video after the game how he reacted to that, which was, of course, by throwing off his jacket and screaming "fuck" as loud as he possibly could. After somebody told him not to react, I don't know if that was Andy Reid. My head
Yeah.
canon is that the person saying don't react to him having come out of the game. My head canon is that that's Andy Reid telling him that, and he
Yeah.
just screams "fuck" in Andy Reid's face because that's how pissed off he was. And then
Yes.
he ran into the tunnel, which is
Right.
also an absurd situation to be
That's
happening
such a
considering
goat thing to
it
do.
just is. He almost ran over the security guard going back into the tunnel. I mean, oof.
Yeah.
Yes, I can't think of many bigger C's than this
Yeah.
C.
Well, to combo that, can you think of a bigger H for handling
No,
adversity? So
no, certainly
I,
not.
I mean,
It's
one
so
of
funny because this is just a goof. It's like a divisional round game against the Jags.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like for many franchises, this would be the most dramatic and consequential
thing
playoff
that's ever
game
happened
in
to him.
their
Yeah.
entire history. Yes,
Yep. Yep. This is one of the biggest H moments in Chiefs system history.
it
Not
is for sure.
necessarily, I mean, the given the drama that was just created in the playoffs with Mahomes, going down. I mean, the Chiefs immediately forced a punt on the next Jags drive, but the Jags did manage to punt it down inside the 1 yard line. And so trotting out to take the snap was not number 15. It was number 4. It was Chad Henne. Mahomes, as we talked about, was on the sidelines. He was pleading to be led back in the game. He then sprinted to the X-ray room, as you said, and all Chad Henne did was lead one of the biggest handle adversity moments in, dare I say, sports history. So backed up on his own 1 yard line, leading 10-7 with 10 minutes to go in the second quarter, and not having taken a live bullet as a quarterback in the NFL in a while. I mean, this was as hard of a situation to come into for a team that just won 14 regular season games. This was not a fringe playoff team. This was not the quarterback was going to win MVP. Like everything that goes into what a backup quarterback's job can get, the hardest it can get is like when the stakes are the highest and you have to just be thrown in. He didn't get a week to prepare. We were talking about after this game, like if Henne had to prepare and be the starter for the Bengals, like at least they would get a whole week
Sure.
of dialing. I mean, of getting him, the reps and all that stuff. He just had to walk in to this game, and he immediately found Kelsey for a 6 yard gain. A lot of good commentary about how Andy Reid is like so good at getting guys comfortable early, and how a lot of people would have handed that ball off at the 1 and probably gotten stuffed, and instead the Chiefs immediately trust their backup quarterback to go out there and complete a pass. Now, obviously, he's completing it to the GOAT, so that helps. But I mean, just to be able to get that done was a really nice start to the drive. And then they handed off to Pacheco twice for 8 yards and 7 yards. But on 2nd and 3, he couldn't connect with Noah Gray over the middle. Kind of a bad play by Gray there, but not a great ball. But it brings up 3rd and 3. And in many scenarios like this, even if the backup quarterback just gets you out 15 or so yards from your own end zone and gets the punt away, like that's a
Right.
job well done. That's fine. But in comes the guy that torched the Jags a few weeks ago, who we've talked about, Kadarius Toney, converts it for a first down plus an added 15 when previously mentioned hitman Arden Key is rough again and called for roughing on Chad Henne. So he's trying to wreck the game as best he can. But Kadarius Toney has other plans. The refs finally call Arden Key on that penalty. Seriously, fuck that guy. Arden Key was so dirty in this game. I was so mad. He's a former Raider, so he hates the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Hate that
Oh,
guy.
yeah.
And then right after that, Isaiah Pacheco comes in and goes, "All right, guys, I got this." He rips off, probably the second best run of his career after that Jets long touchdown run that he had. But this one's a 39-yard gallop down the left sideline. He's got the head bob, kind of reminds me of Adrian Peterson running when he really got going, like just hauling ass. And he gets the Chiefs all the way down to the 4. And Pacheco then on the very next play picks up 3 more yards. And on 2nd and 1, Henne drops back after play action, finds Kelsey wide open, left side, touchdown, and a 17-7 lead. Travis immediately fires that ball into the stands. He did later apologize to Henne on New Heights for getting rid of that ball. And they were actually able to find the fan via New Heights and track him down and get that ball back to Chad. One of the cooler, this was still like baby New Heights times. Like this was one of the cooler early stories for New Heights. It was like, oh, these guys are like popular enough that if they go on there and they say like, hey, we threw this ball into the stands, like they actually got the right people to see that. I know your mind was elsewhere during this entire 99-yard drive, as all of ours were, on what was going on with Mahomes, but what a way to handle that adversity.
Incredible. I mean, first of all, we have to point out the obvious comparison to another 99-yard playoff touchdown drive, the drive. Now, John Elway made an entire career out of this game-tying drive in the fourth quarter that didn't even win the game.
Yeah.
And
And the kick
this
missed, by the way. The
and the
Denver
kick,
kick.
the game-winning air quotes kick definitely missed, but things were really crude back in 1989, and there just was no way to know except for, live video and
Yeah.
just anyways.
Eyeballs.
Yeah, doors and feet and walking. Um this was one of the biggest handle adversity moments in the Mahomes era for sure. And obviously, the reason it attains that status is because it was Chad Henne out there handling the adversity instead of Patrick Mahomes. To your point, I mean, not a guy that was getting a lot of live reps. So he threw two passes in the 2022 regular season. That was in week 7 in a
Jeez.
blowout against 49ers. So
Right.
Chiefs traveled to San Francisco. They won that game 44-23. Chad Henne gets in to throw two passes. He did not complete either one. He played 6 offensive snaps, and the other 3 touches that he got were kneel downs in that game. He got into the game in week 17 against the Raiders to kneel down the last 2 plays of the game. He was in for 7 offensive snaps, so it would have just been handoffs and kneel downs in that game. The last time Chad Henne completed a pass before this drive was in week 7 of 2021 when he came in against the Titans in that 27-3 blowout loss. The Chiefs pulled their starters in that game because they were getting blown out. And that was the last time he completed rather a regular season pass attempt. So, or
Odd.
playoff pass attempt, obviously. So I mean, this guy didn't get into a playoff game in the 2022 or the 2021 season playoffs. He hadn't completed a pass in a game before this drive in like a year and a half.
He was 5-7, 5 for 7 on this drive. I
And
mean,
he was 5 for 7 on a 99-yard touchdown scoring drive in playoffs. I mean,
unbelievable.
that is again, like, it would be very hard to it's crazy again, like, not to downplay the significance of this game because it's a cool game. And, someday we'll rank all of these games in terms of how near
Sure.
and dear they are to our heart. But at the end of the day, it's a divisional game against the 9-8 Jacksonville Jaguars, right? Coming to town,
Non-rival,
right? Like, yeah,
yeah.
like, it's not a game that should rank anywhere near the top in any of these categories. And
Right.
yet, the Chiefs just have this knack for creating drama and handling adversity. They also have a knack for inspiring hope. So let's hit that one.
You also have a knack for transitions. Well done.
Thank you.
So, of course, inspire hope. The Jags ended the first half after that 99-yard drive with a 41-yard field goal. They did move it between the 20s with ease, but Doug Peterson didn't really feel like going for it on 4th and 2 from the Chiefs' 23 with 31 seconds left, even though Mahomes was seemingly out of the game. Poor Doug Peterson. He just seemed to coach this one a little scared, in my opinion. That was I know you're at the 23, and best case scenario there is you probably just only chip away a couple more yards and get an easier field goal. But if I were him, I would have tried to take a little bit more advantage of that. But
And this is the same guy that went for a
right, get the onside kick and
onside
yes,
kick, right? Yeah, exactly.
Doug Peterson is not known for coaching scared, which is why
not at all.
that stands out to me. If it'd be one thing if it was a really conservative head coach and that's just how they roll, but like I would have expected a little bit more fire there. But the real inspiration for this one, the inspiring hope, came on the other side of the halftime break. After we were all spent the whole thing torn up, worried about Mahomes, the King returns. And while he only goes 1 for 3 on the opening drive, he does also hilariously scramble for 4 yards, probably just going for a little test drive on the old ankle, see how it feels. It wasn't 100%. It was taped. He was favoring it, but not as much as he was in the moments after the injury. But he was out there. Really just makes you appreciate his toughness, doesn't it?
I mean, it's so funny that we just went, create drama, handle adversity, inspire hope. I mean, these are 3 all-timers.
You're right. How much more inspirational does it get for Mahomes
Patrick
to walk
Mahomes
out
coming
after
back?
halftime?
Yeah. Patrick Mahomes coming out of that tunnel at the end of the half, coming back into the game. I mean, even just to complete one pass and then scramble for 4 yards, and then the Chiefs having to punt the ball away. I mean, still pretty inspiring stuff. I gotta say, I mean, were you concerned at all in the moment watching the game that maybe Patrick didn't give us the best chance to win. I mean, Chad Henne just went John Elway on them.
You know, it's interesting because a lot of things swirl through your head at that moment.
Yeah.
Number one, risking Mahomes'
Right.
further injury. I mean,
Yes.
that was probably my number one concern, honestly. It wasn't that I knew that if Mahomes was out there and super, super limited and was just going to limp and hand the ball off and they were going to punt a bunch, like I knew the Chiefs would figure would make a change. But to me, it was all about, all right, the Chiefs are up 17-10 right now at home. And, if Mahomes gets through this game, but it costs him the next game or
Yeah, you had to
more,
play the Bengals in
you know, I,
6 days.
it was all about just protecting him at all costs. And if that meant putting Henne out there, you know, I would have been for it. Let's say that he comes out there for the second half, he tries it and does this, kind of limps around a little bit, and then the next drive, Chad Henne came back out there. I would not have been someone that would have been like, God, Andy, what are you doing? Or I mean, obviously that would have been the right move if that's where the Chiefs went with it. But they didn't, and so yes, I was concerned. But at the same time, how can you not be happy? How can you not, I was concerned that we wouldn't see him play again for the playoffs after Chad Henne came in. And to see him after halftime come back out, it's such a Mahomes moment. It's such a Mahomes way to, bounce back from something like that. I mean, the knee injury only took him 2 games. He played through a bunch of shit in his career where a lot of other quarterbacks probably would have missed some time. And this was another example where, his toughness shone through, and that's super appropriate to then move on in the system to engage physically, because after the Jags punt, the next Chiefs drive, I would say it starts off with the exact opposite of an Inspire Hope situation. They were faced with a 3rd and 1. They tried the old Noah Gray sneak play. They couldn't obviously sneak with their recently injured quarterback or their quarterback that was injured on a sneak play a couple years ago. So they try and motion in the tight end. And by this time, everyone's watched the Chiefs. They all know what's coming. We talked about it in the Blake Bell
Yeah.
bullshit from the previous game.
Oh, I mean, they
And
thought that Noah Gray, I mean, now
yeah,
that it's Noah Gray now, so
right.
it's
Right. It's
sneaky
going to be
again.
different. No, it's not. It was blown up. Obviously, didn't even need to tell you that. And the Chiefs punted it back to the Jags, so that was another quick 3 and out. But Trevor Lawrence, he didn't have an answer. He couldn't come up with anything after moving the ball from his 11 only out to his 22. He punts it right back to the Chiefs. This is where we're in engaged physically. The Chiefs really, really stepped up in this one. This offense of the Jags had been on a roll. They had, clearly had playmakers. And at the end of 3 quarters at this point in the game, they've held them to 10 points. And the opening drive touchdown is the majority of the damage. I mean, after that, they really haven't moved the ball on the Chiefs at all. And, everything that the team was going through with Mahomes' injury and really needing the defense to pitch in and play an outsized portion of the game. This is such a Spags moment. Like, as much as the Mahomes stuff was like classic Mahomes, this is like when you need Spags, when you need that defense to show up in a big playoff game, when the offense is struggling, like just really, really impressed with how they engaged physically. They picked up a couple sacks. We'll talk later on about some turnovers they come up with late in the game, but super, super happy with the Chiefs' defense performance in this one.
Yeah, and really this was our first look at the Chiefs' dynamic 2022 rookie class in the playoffs. I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
they obviously had huge moments in the regular season. Karlaftis had a pretty good sack total for a rookie. Obviously, Jalen Watson won that game early against the Chargers with the pick
Right.
six
100
in the end
yards.
zone.
Yeah.
Right. Sky Moore didn't really do anything. Brian Cook had some moments. I mean,
Joshua
Trent
Williams had
Trent
some moments.
Trent McDuffie had some moments, but this was
Yeah.
your first real test, right? I mean, you can see how a rookie is going to do in the regular season, and that's all well and good, but the level of intensity gets ratcheted up a notch when you're in the playoffs. And
Right.
none of these kids, which is what they were, have played a playoff game before. And the lights are brightest in January and February. And not only that, I mean, this is the longest season of football any of these guys have ever played. So
Exactly.
you have to worry about fatigue. You have to worry about that rookie wall that everybody talks about. And so, in addition to Spags, I mean, like this was kind of a coming out party for this 2022 Chiefs rookie class: McDuffie, Karlaftis, Leo Chenal.
Joshua Williams.
We've talked about all these guys: Joshua Williams, Nazeeh Johnson, Jalen Watson. So, I mean, this really showed that these guys could play, and obviously, this is going to be a theme
Yeah.
throughout this playoff run,
Next
and
couple
then
games. Yeah.
into the next playoff run.
Right.
Just how incredible and dynamic this rookie class was. But yeah, this was a big, engaged physically game for the defense, and really set a tone for the playoff games to come.
It did. In Veach we trust. That was, I mean, if anybody singularly won that playoff run other than Mahomes, it's probably Brett Veach. I mean, it
Yeah.
was incredible. So, of course, we have to get to F, finish strong. After the Jags did end up, they finally did break through and scored a touchdown to cut the Chiefs' lead to 3 points, but there was 11:49 to go in the game. Mahomes and the Chiefs, they needed an answer. The injured Mahomes and all that stuff, they needed it to match that touchdown. And I tell you, as sharp as the opening drive was, and I think starting off the game, you really do like to punch a team in the mouth, and so that opening drive was more important. But getting the ball back up three with 11 minutes to go, the Chiefs orchestrated an 11-play touchdown drive that saw zero third down attempts. I mean, when this 2022 team had things going underneath, they were a machine. They could just eat up yards and move the ball. Kelsey had catches for 11 and 15. Juju had one for 16. Tony had a 14-yard run where he trucked two Jags, got on the sideline, ran through a couple guys, almost scored a touchdown, got down really close, and then Mahomes on first and goal from the 6, nifty little jump pass off of his one good ankle, his left ankle. He just kind of was in traffic in the middle of the field, saw MVS streaking over the middle, jumped up, zinged it. 27-17 Chiefs, finishing strong. They hadn't really done much on offense. The 99-yard drive was crazy and good, but the starting offense since that opening drive really hadn't produced a ton. And then when they got the ball back, and Mahomes on his bad ankle needed to do something, they did it. It was incredibly impressive.
Yeah, I mean, I posted this clip the other day because the NBA Finals just ended, in a gentleman's sweep, and a couple blowouts in there. The last game of the thing was a blowout. The Stanley Cup has been uninspiring. It's like Mahomes said. He keeps you real close to the end. He makes good TV, and you're never going to
It's
see
what
him
I
blow.
do.
It's what I do. It's just what I do. He he just has a flair for the dramatic, and
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the guy isn't going to be able to give 110% on every play when he's literally got a high ankle sprain, and you could see him laboring. But like you said, I mean, when the chips are down and it's do or die in the playoffs, I mean, he came out with as good a drive as we've seen from him on one leg, and then throwing a jump pass off of his good angle. It's
Man.
just like, it's crazy that I mean, it really harks back to the criticism of him, coming out that he has no footwork, right? Like he's too much of an
Mm-hmm.
improviser. And it's like, yeah, I mean, this goes back to the first drive of the game. Like I was saying, like this, you saw in this game, even after the ankle injury, like this is like the final, maybe not even the final form, but a what would be the final form for anybody else. Let's say that. Like I'm not going to discount the
Yes,
possibility
that's
that he
fair.
has several additional tiers above this,
Uh-huh.
but it's like he has every club in the bag, right? Like he just has every tool he needs to succeed. And if that means a jump pass off of my non-throwing ankle, because my throwing ankle is suffering from a high ankle sprain, that's what he's going to do. And
Man.
this was a super clutch drive to put the Chiefs up in a commanding position.
It was. And of course, when the Chiefs have finished strong, they have to separate entirely. And we'll put the two Jags fourth quarter turnovers in this section. They were
Yeah.
getting close. They drove down into they had a goal to go. And then Jamal Agnew dropped the ball. Nick Bolton recovered it at the 6 yard line. So that could have cut the game back to 3. And instead the Chiefs get the ball back. And then after they punt the very next Jags drive, they're at midfield and Jalen Watson drops back, aforementioned rookie, on an insane one-handed interception where, again, that's like last gasps for the Jags at this point. If they score or can get down there, they're really going to put this game into doubt again. And instead, Jalen Watson snags it. The Jags do end the game with a field goal with a couple seconds to go. They attempt to onside kick, which was appropriately recovered by Kadarius Toney, aforementioned Jags killer. The divisional round,
and I mean, notorious hands guy.
hands guy. Everyone. If there's one thing we know about Kadarius Toney, if the game's on the line on an onside kick, you want him
Kadarius
to
Toney
cover
on the
that
hands
ball.
team is an incredibly absurd.
Troll.
I mean,
It's a troll by Uncle Dave.
that's
But
crazy.
yeah, so
That's
the
crazy.
divisional round, they separated entirely from the Jags. They had the Bengals waiting because the Bengals had gone into Buffalo and won a laugher in the snow, setting up the big rematch for next week. Separate entirely. That is the Chief system.
I love it. Let's get to awards. For those of you unfamiliar, we have 3 types of awards. They are always Sunny inspired. We have our 5-star men. Five-star man! Five-star man! Who through their play scream out, "I'm a 5-star man." We have our trash men.
I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage.
Who are eating garbage all over the field. And we have our wild cards.
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
Who, of course, are capable of anything. I'll start us off, and then you can take the next 2. My 5-star man is, of course, Travis Kelce. 17 targets in this game, 14 catches for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the opening drive. And then, of course, when Mahomes leaves the game with a high ankle sprain and the ball is on the 1-yard line and the Chiefs need to go 99 yards for the score, who else but Travis Kelce? The only problem, of course, is that he threw that ball into the stands, but he got it back. That's a 5-star man. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a man that owns up to his mistakes. Years later, they get on a sports podcast and he just, he's dating the most famous woman in the world and he's getting Chad Henne's first playoff touchdown ball back. That is a 5-star man through and through. Travis Kelce.
14 of 17 for 98 and 2 tuds. When the Chiefs lost one GOAT, fortunately, they still had another one on the field. I mean, that's absurd. He's great. I'll pick Jalen Watson, the rookie. In addition to that awesome one-handed interception, he defended 2 other passes, had 4 tackles, didn't miss a tackle, and a QB hit just thrown in for good measure. Make sure that the quarterback knew where he was. The rookies, they showed up. The kids are doing all right. This was Jalen Watson will kind of take this award home for his whole class in this one.
I think that's fair.
He's the poster boy for it, but man, talk about just a absolute showing by these rookies. Love to see it.
Yeah, give me the trash man.
My trash man is going to be the motherfucker Arden Key, the former Raider that hurt Mahomes, that tried to hurt Chad Henne, that played dirty. I mean, the hit sucked. He's had other instances both against the Chiefs and against other teams throughout his career of playing dirty, and hate that guy.
Yeah, I know that there will be some people out there that'll say, I think it was a clean hit. Here's my take on this. I think the hit, the roll essentially onto his ankle, I think it can be interpreted both ways. I am not inclined to give Arden Key, former Raider, and a guy that has a history of extracurricular activities.
By the way, also a former Niner and Titan. So that guy.
I mean, hates us. Yeah, right.
Hates us.
I mean, I am not giving somebody with that kind of history the benefit of the doubt in this situation. Right. So I tend to side with you there. For my trash man, we were just talking about how great the defensive rookie class was. And we really had high hopes for Sky Moore, the 54th overall pick, after the Chiefs traded back and passed on George Pickens, who, of course, had a promising rookie year with the Steelers. Hey, yikes. 1 rush for 3 yards in this game, 1 catch for 0 yards. That is, It's tough to give the trash man to anybody else when you have a stat line like that. 2 touches for 3 yards, 1 catch for 0 yards.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Sky, but that is a trash man worthy performance. Why don't you give me your wild card?
Sure. I think everyone could see this one coming. It's a guy who's capable of anything, including coming off the bench when he was not expecting to play and leading a 99-yard touchdown drive at 30. I don't have it off the top of my head. I think he was 37. 37. Yeah,
37.
37-year-old Chad Henne. Unbelievable. He is, of course, the wild card in this one. It's so funny how the story of the Chiefs cannot be told without multiple backup quarterbacks. Like, just showing up and being there. Henne, of course, being the big one with this one and the Browns game, but just an unbelievable performance by him.
Yeah, I mean Matt Moore coming in
Right,
regular
Matt
season,
Moore and him are the
obviously,
two big
but
ones.
I mean,
Yeah.
but obviously the playoff moments belong to the Henny Badger. It's really hard to argue with that selection. Definitely a guy who's capable of anything and showed it in this game. I think we gave him the wild card for his performance against the Browns as well.
I believe
But
we did.
that was also because he threw what could have been a game-losing pick in that
A
game.
little
And
arm punt, yeah.
he was clean in this one. I will take the other quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, and I mean, obviously this wasn't his cleanest performance from a box score standpoint. It wasn't his most overwhelming statistical output, but the first drive, as I said, I maintain is the greatest he's ever looked on the field, and
Agreed.
I mean, he'll get back there. I mean, we're gonna see him reach those heights and go Super Saiyan many times in the future. But this was just, I mean, this was again, this was a merging of all the best aspects of Patrick Mahomes into one fearsome God aspect. And then, of course, he got hurt and he was struck down, and yet he fell, and then he came back to us at the turning of the tide, and he won a playoff game on one leg. And that's Patrick Mahomes. That's wild card behavior. That's a wrap for the next great American dynasty.
Joining us now is conference managing editor for A to Z Sports, who you can find on Twitter at A to Z Sports NFL. It is friend of the show, Charles Goldman. Charles, how the heck are you tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me back, guys. I think this is my fourth time on the show. I don't know.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It's starting to get up there. It's starting to get up there.
It's been a minute though, Charles, and so we're glad to have you back. And I don't remember the last time you were on, but a lot has happened. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl again. Pretty cool stuff there. Little back-to-back Super Bowl champs here. So I mean, we got a lot of time to cover in this segment and a lot of potential topics to discuss, but I wanted to start there. First chance to catch up with you. Figured I'd just go ahead and put you on the spot right off the bat. Ask you to choose a favorite Super Bowl win. You've got 54, you got 57, you got 58. Which one are you taking?
Oh man, I think it's gotta be 54, right? We were waiting for it for so long. As much as the recent ones have been a joy, that one just it hits so much sweeter, and just the way in which they got there, coming back from all those games, having been down even in that Super Bowl, and just the moments they hit right. Though this one, that last moment with Mecole, the corn dog moment, that was pretty special.
Can you rank the three Super Bowl teams in order of who do you think was the best of the three at football?
Oh man, that's an interesting one. I mean, I think this last one we can all confidently say the offense was the worst in that particular one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think the defense was probably the best. So if I'm ranking like the units, I guess. So that one,
Yeah, you got 6 units, offense and defense. You've got defense number 1 of 23, offense of 23, probably the worst unit of the bunch. Worst.
So that one's probably 3. And then I would say, I think offense wise, the first Super Bowl, I think LIV was probably the best because you still had Tyreek, obviously.
Yeah.
That one would probably be the number 1 offense. I'd probably put it at maybe the number 2 defense. I think that the defense actually in the Eagles game was probably the worst of the defenses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
And then I think that would probably be the middling offense too.
Yeah.
That's about right. I would go there as well. I think that's it's been funny. They've been offense heavy, defense heavy, a little balanced. They've just kind of figured it out any way to do it. Last question on the on kind of the big picture Super Bowl stuff. Andy, Pat, and Travis all on their way to goatdom, if not maybe they're already. Of the three of them, who has the best chance to end up being the best ever?
Ooh. Um, Man, I think Pat is still I think he's got that chance. And I know it's polarizing to like say that because,
Not on this show, it's
Not
not.
not really.
the,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
the GOAT quarterback conversation, everyone has their own opinions on it and what it takes and all of that. But I think even without the head to head against Brady, I still think he can become the GOAT quarterback.
That's fair. I mean, I think it's in the conversation, right? And I mean, I think you could make an argument for all three guys, which is why it's an interesting question, right? Like, I mean, Andy, if he wins, one or two more, especially if he wins one this year, Taylor and I have talked all offseason about what, a third Super Bowl would mean and going back to back doing the three-peat, obviously, which has never been done, what that would mean for the team legacy wise for everybody involved and everybody attached to it. And I don't know if you've gotten a sense other than what we've kind of heard in the media, anything behind the scenes about what the team is doing. I mean, like, I know they're saying the right things, but does the team really believe that they can win a third Super Bowl in a row? Is that something that you think is actually like being seriously discussed? Like, it's never happened before. I get that they
Yeah.
want to do it, but like, really, for real, do you
I mean,
think
I think it's they realize they have the formula to do it, right? I think after
yeah.
going back to back, they've kind of realized, okay, like we've figured out how we can do this from top to bottom, from the personnel standpoint, from the coaching standpoint, from the schematic standpoint. And it starts very small, right? It's a day-to-day process that they have to build upon. It's not really this overarching idea like where everyone shows up at work and they're like, okay, we're gonna three-peat, we're gonna three-peat. It's just they're putting in the work behind the scenes, and there's a lot of motivation from those who have been there, but also, they're supplementing the pieces that they have lost with guys who are hungry, who want to win, who want to be a part of this. I think of like the Hollywood Brown signing, and one of the things he said during one of the press conferences recently really kind of stuck with me. But it was kind of about, he's not just doing this one thing anymore, right? He's being used, his skills are being used in their fullest potential.
Mhm.
And I feel like you bring in those types of guys who want to be a part of this, who want to win, whether it's free agents, undrafted free agents, draft picks, coaching, even coaching staff, front office personnel, whatever it is, they've got these puzzle pieces, and it's all about stacking them together in the right way throughout the course of a very long season.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of the things they've been doing to supplement this roster. And I know you do a lot of work with the draft, and that's something that you really prepare for and look forward to. So I'm curious, looking back now, we're a couple months out from the draft. Why don't you give me the pick that you were least surprised by, as in like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Of course, the Chiefs are always going to take this guy. And then maybe the guy that you were most surprised by, that maybe they broke type with a little bit, if there is a guy. I mean, it could be that these are all just predictable, obvious Chiefs picks, but I'm curious to get your perspective on that, since I know you do a lot of work with the draft and have some sources inside the building.
Yeah. I think it was interesting, this the stuff surrounding like Kingsley Suamataia. He, there was some chatter early on that like he was someone they were looking at the end of like the first round, right? And then there were some things that came out kind of after the fact, like I think it was I'm trying to remember what team it was. Maybe it was the Ravens. They felt like the Chiefs were going to take their guy, whoever they ended up taking. I think the kid out of Washington.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And I just thought that was interesting because there was a lot of smoke for the Chiefs and Kingsley, and how they felt that like, the Chiefs were going after their guy. I felt like Kingsley was always going to be a Chief. They brought him in. Obviously, the Andy Reid alma mater connection, which
Right.
I do think that's a little bit overplayed, right? I don't think that's necessarily something that holds a whole lot of weight, but I don't think it hurt him here. I think it actually kind of probably helped him a little bit. And I think that he's someone who's probably going to surprise. I think right now, just after kind of the whole mandatory minicamp portion, I know he's kind of splitting reps a little bit with Wanya Morris, but I tend to think that they're going to give him every possible chance to win the starting left tackle job as a rookie, which like that's a hard thing to do. Yes, these guys are better prepared to like play in the NFL with how much of a passing league it is in college football nowadays. But I mean, just coming in as a rookie to protect the blind side of future Hall of Fame quarterback, that's
Yeah.
a tough ask. And the fact that that he's already kind of turned some heads there and winning some of these battles against good players too, right? Winning some one-on-one reps against guys like George Karlaftis, who's really come along, now entering his third year. That's impressive to see, even when the pads haven't come on, right?
Right.
So I think he's someone who has kind of always been a chief, right? And
Right.
and from when this process started, and then if I were to say someone maybe like strayed or it was a little bit surprising, it's probably the Jaden Hicks pick, and not necessarily because he's not like a Spagsy type of player, because he absolutely is. I just think it's more so just the fact that they didn't really have like a big need at the safety position. I think
Sure.
it makes a little bit more sense as we've gotten into the offseason. We've understood that, okay, Shamari Connor's going to play a lot of nickel this year. He's probably going to be your starting nickel corner. So that takes him kind of out of the safety rotation a little bit. It gives you a little flexibility, versatility that he can, back off and play some safety, and, gives you opportunities to have these different looks. But now you're adding just another versatile safety to the mix. And, when you consider Steve Spagnuolo's system, I know a lot of people are thinking about like the cornerback spot in L'Jarius Sneed and how, important he had been to the defense. But the quarterback position in the Chiefs scheme is very simple. It's not a it's not like a difficult position to pick up. There's really like on a given call, like three responsibilities. And, the person who gives them the signal, who lets them know what they're supposed to do on a given defensive call is the safety. And they really
Right.
run the back end of that defense. So, having guys who are one, smart, but two, versatile, like Hicks is, and can play, kind of both free safety and strong safety in the box. I think that's something that is going to be beneficial this year, and especially with Connor sliding into that slot role.
Looking at the roster, just kind of holistically going into the draft and where you anticipated the Chiefs' needs to be, what do you think about the job they did trying to fill those holes in the draft? Do you think that pretty much the positions of need were addressed, or how would you rate what they did there?
Yeah, I know people kind of wanted more at the wide receiver position than just Worthy. I kind of I understand it, but I think now we're kind of seeing right how this is all playing out and the competition they have in that room. And I think if you added another guy, it would have been too many. It wouldn't have given certain guys a chance to, have that opportunity to prove themselves. We might not be, seeing or getting hyped about a potential Nico Remigio,
Yeah.
landing on the roster, or we wouldn't have an opportunity to see can Sky Moore or Kadarius Toney like turn it around and maybe be an important part and a big part of this thing moving forward. So I think I was okay with that. I would say the one position that I was a little surprised they didn't address in the draft was the running back spot. I kind of felt that like
Yeah.
that was an area they needed to improve at, just given the fact that Isaiah Pacheco had ran into some injury troubles. Maybe they felt a little bit confident and okay with not doing that, given that, okay, Jerick McKinnon's still out there and available. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still on the team. so they have some guys that they're comfortable with, if not, guys that they're, super duper excited about, but they have guys that know the system that they can kind of plug in there. And then, they bring in some of these undrafted free agents and what have you to kind of compete. And, we'll see if Deneric Prince can step up. I've heard some good things about him in his second year, but we also heard good things about him at this portion of the offseason as a rookie, and that didn't
Right.
necessarily pan out. So I feel like once the pads come on, we'll understand a little bit more about their situation at the running back position. But and again, maybe it's also indicative of how the NFL views the running back position as a whole right now. And I say that knowing that like just a couple hours ago, like Ramondre Stevenson signed like a 4-year deal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is wild, right? But we don't see
really
many
wild.
like long-term running back contracts anymore. But I really do think the NFL feels that, these guys are kind of a dime a dozen and that they can kind of find them as they need to. And it's just kind of that low value position now. Um, but yeah, that was the one that caught me a little bit by surprise because I would think they would want to get like another guy there who they're comfortable with on that same level as, as a Pacheco.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, even devoting a late round pick like they did for Pacheco, and throwing darts there, getting bodies. But yeah, that was a little bit surprising. You kind of touched on this a little bit, but I want to ask you about Xavier Worthy. Obviously, first wide receiver the Chiefs have drafted in the first round since John Baldwin in 2011. Fastest player in NFL Combine history, but also one of the youngest wide receivers in the draft. Obviously undersized. He's been limited in OTAs and minicamp with a hamstring injury. And traditionally, we have to accept that wide receivers as rookies traditionally have not had huge roles in Andy Reid's offense. So I just am kind of curious to get your thoughts on him after OTAs and minicamp kind of transitioning into the next phase of the offseason here from the draft. Like what you've been hearing about him, whether the pick was surprising to you, and what you kind of see his role being week one.
Yeah, I do think that the pick wasn't all that surprising. I mean, I know we saw kind of after the combine and all of that, we saw kind of the excitement from Pat and Charles Goldman, who was tweeting about him and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And I think even like in the weeks after Andy Reid got asked about him once or twice, like it was he was someone that got on their radar, and I think was on their radar even before that. Everyone looks to the speed, but you turn on his tape and he's really a very much so a full football player. He can run the full route tree, and I'm almost as impressed with his speed or with his ability to decelerate as I am with his ability to
Sure.
accelerate, right? His ability to stop and it's deadly. I mean, he can create separation just from that because guys are yeah going as fast as they can to try and compensate for the fact that you're dealing with one of the fastest players in NFL history, right? And now they're going to have to be able to stop on a dime, and it's just hard to do when you're backpedaling in certain routes and whatnot. I think he's going to be really deadly on things like comeback routes, out routes, certain in breaking routes, where if you get a guy's hips turned in a certain direction, it's going to be over. Um, but obviously we need to see him on the field, and he hasn't. He had one and a half OTA practices before they had the hammy issue, and they pulled him off, and they didn't have him at mandatory minicamp. I was told he was pretty close
Hmm.
to being back out there, but they just wanted to be safe. You actually saw like that first day of mandatory minicamp. He was out there. He had his full jersey. He had shorts on. When he was in OTAs, he had the long pants on, right? So like it was very clear, like, hey, not participating, right? The fact that he had the shorts on probably went through some warm ups and things early on with the training staff just to see if he could go. But didn't have a helmet the whole time, so that's usually indication too that hey, he's not going to go. But everything the Chiefs have kind of told us to this point, the media frontward facing, and then even really behind the scenes is that he's fine.
Yeah.
I do think, there's something to, training for the combine versus training for football activities.
Right.
And I believe Pat kind of mentioned this, and I even wrote about it before Pat spoke about it. I was like, Pat, are you reading some of my articles, man?
There
But
you go. Same page as the goat. Love it.
right. But no, so and it yeah, it's one of those things where I think he was trying to go a little bit too hard and just overexerted himself and um hopefully it doesn't turn into a recurring issue. I know the kid over at the Green Bay Packers past couple of years has had some issues, Christian Watson, and they actually found that like he had certain like muscle mass type issue.
Yeah, his legs are like differently muscled.
Right. Yeah. So like one hamstring was like stronger than the other, and he actually had to work with some specialists and stuff like that. I don't think it's that deep for Worthy. And I think we'll see him, day one of early portion of training camp. Rookies report early. He'll be out there working with Pat early and be able to kind of make up for some of what he missed during the OTAs and mandatory minicamp, and I think that'll be sufficient. I do think it does set him behind a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it does, it does say something that Matt Nagy was out there with him every day and going through each rep and saying, okay, you're the X receiver on this rep, what is your responsibility, and having Worthy talk him through it as the play was kind of unfolding in practice. So he's got the mental reps is what they call those, right?
Right.
He's got the mental reps, but now it's just a matter of, hey, what can you put together on the field and how quickly can you? And I think that will very much so determine his role early on. And I do think it's interesting that, right after the draft, there was some talk like Dave Tobe, I feel like said, that Worthy is someone that they have envisioned for kickoffs and kick returns and punt returns. And I feel like he's kind of pulled back on that a little bit. Now they're looking at some other guys just because he hasn't been out on the field, but also, I think they're a little hesitant to give him that role when they want him on working on offense. They don't want him to end up injuring himself. See Kadarius Toney in training camp. When was that? Last year or the year before?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
2 years ago, right? Or no,
Right, all
last
those
year.
Tony
Yeah.
injuries bleed together, guys.
Right. They do. That's true.
right. So I think they want to avoid that. And having him focus on the offensive aspect of it, I think that will kind of be key to avoiding that moving forward.
Well, that's kind of a good sign, right? Because obviously, I mean, different draft capital, obviously, but Tyreek, when he came into the league, was a gadget guy, and I totally get Dave Tope being interested in turning, the fastest man in combine history into a returner. But he also weighs like 170. Maybe he'll play it like maybe he'll top out at like 180. I mean, he's not ever going to be, a super durable guy. So I'm glad that the Chiefs are. I mean, I think it kind of points to wanting to keep him healthy, but also we've got plans for this guy on offense. I hope anyway. So you kind of mentioned the left tackle battle already, and I kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit more deeply. Obviously, Kingsley Suamataia
Nailed it.
is. It sounds like maybe as the inside track here, but like other than him and Wanya Morris, is there anybody else in this battle? And who do you see coming out on top here? I mean, it sounds like Kingsley's got the inside track, but he is a rookie. Is it really just, a rookie and a second year, mid-round pick that are battling for the blindside protector spot on this roster?
I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what transpires and if they make any sort of moves, in the early portion of camp. And I think that the wild card in this situation is actually Joe Tooney, because he hasn't practiced yet. He's still recovering from his pec injury last year, which it sounds like he ultimately did have to have surgery on it. I know there was some debate whether or not he he would have to have surgery, whether or not he got a couple different opinions on it. And I think ultimately they went the route of a surgical repair. So I think they're waiting to see what transpires there. I think they're very hopeful that he'll be able to get in there at some point in camp and will be okay to start the season. But they're playing around with some things. They are playing with Wanya Morris playing some left guard, right? So if there's a situation where the best five offensive linemen, are Wanya Morris playing left guard and Kingsley playing left tackle, I think at that point, you have to consider, okay, who else is going to slot in at the left tackle spot? And I would say probably your third guy right now would be Chu Godric, who's a second year player who never played a game of football until preseason last year,
Right.
Which, is a little surprising, but also at the same time, if you saw him play in those preseason games last year, you could see the potential there. So I think that's someone to keep an eye on. I don't know that he's necessarily in the battle to start, but could that change as things kind of progress this offseason? It certainly could happen. And then, obviously there's still a couple guys out there to keep an eye on if Tooney does end up, not ready to go or taking a little longer to heal and recover. I don't think they're going to rush him back. So I think that would potentially impact the left tackle position more than it would be, okay, we're going to go out and sign like a guard to play in place of him. I think it would more be something like, okay, we'll go out and get low cost Bakhtiari, or we'll bring back oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on our left tackle last year, but he's still a free agent. So
Donovan Smith.
Donovan Smith.
Did you see the Bakhtiari quote about that he just wants to play with the next Super Bowl MVP?
Right, which is like
Schefter asked him that, and it's like,
right.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, the next Super Bowl MVP. I mean, Mahomes has been 3 out of the last 5 years Super Bowl MVP. So it's like the next Super Bowl MVP, you have pretty good odds that it's Patrick Lavon Mahomes. So and look, I mean, I don't know if he has anything left in the tank, right? But at a low cost 1 year deal, bring him in, veteran for training camp. I say why not? I think they'd probably be a little bit more comfortable with a guy who knows the system like Don Smith, but I also feel like maybe in the long run, a Bakhtiari is a better fit for the offense and the scheme if he's truly healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, we're getting into that time of year where nothing's going to happen for a month, but that's often when you see these veteran guys come in and come in and compete for jobs. So, turning to the secondary, and you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but have you picked up any clues about how the Chiefs are planning to replace L'Jarius Sneed? Obviously, the way they used him last year, he was kind of the number one cover corner. I know that they had him, shadow guys, which is not something that Steve Spagnuolo has always done, that the Chiefs historically have not always done. And obviously L'Jarius Sneed is a guy who, coming up in the system, played a lot of different roles on this team before he sort of evolved into the shutdown corner he was in 2023. Have you gotten a sense at all of how the Chiefs are kind of planning? Really, he's the major departure from the 2023 defense, which obviously was so good down the stretch in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl. Have you gotten a sense of how they plan to replace him?
Yeah, it's going to take a village. I don't think it's going to be any one player asked to replace him. I think the closest in terms of like role as far as replacement goes, it's probably going to be Trent McDuffie. Kind of stepping into that guy that you're going to match up with the number one wide receiver on the opposing team. He has the inside outside flexibility of playing the slot, go play outside. He's already said he's going to be playing more outside this season, and that really it was more of an adjustment for him playing the slot than it was, playing outside. So there's a level of comfort there, I think. in the ability to kind of go back to that. But yeah, it's gonna be multiple guys, which I think is a good thing and a bad thing, right? I think they're confident in guys like Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, because they've stepped up in some big moments already. I know that, internally last year there was a lot of confidence that Najee Johnson was going to be a guy like he was tracking to start last
Right.
year to be that starter opposite McDuffie and Snead when they had three cornerbacks on the field. And obviously he got hurt, and he's been working tirelessly to get back, and he understands that, like, the NFL stands for not for long, right? He doesn't have a lot of time here to come back slowly from this injury. He has to get back to not only where he was, but better than where he was to be able to capture that role again. And they got him a chance to get back in with the starters a little bit at the end of mandatory minicamp there, and at the end of OTAs, and that was good to see and hear. But really, he's gonna, have to prove it again throughout training camp, prove his ability to stay healthy, and prove that he can, be what they need him to be, whether or not that's, the fourth corner off the bench or a starter. So there's that aspect of it, and then you've got, some of these other young guys. Nick Jones is someone that they really like after his rookie season. Echo Boyedo is another guy that they really like for his speed and ability. And then, you look at the rookie this year out of Tennessee, and, he's someone that has been likened to a Bashad Breeland type by Dave Merritt. And I feel like he might be a little bit more of a project. He might be someone that doesn't necessarily start this year. Maybe he plays more special teams to get started, but I think that the potential for him to develop into something special is there. And that's the nice thing. I think really the coaching staff with Dave Merritt, with Donald D also is in the secondary. I think that it's just immense, and having Steve Spagnuolo, of course, who's a secondary coach at heart, having him there as well is really helpful for these guys in their development. So I'm not super concerned about replacing Snead. I think they're going to be good enough in the secondary. Will it be as good as pairing Snead and McDuffie together? Probably not. There'll probably be some hiccups here and there. It's probably going to be hard when they face teams that have three legitimate wide receiver threats. However, I do have confidence that the coaching staff and the personnel that they have, that they can get it done as a group.
So we've talked a little bit about the offense. We've talked a little bit about the defense. I know this offseason, special teams takes a larger role with the new kickoff rules, and that people are really curious to kind of see how this is all going to shake out. First thing I want to ask, gun to your head, do you see Luis Rees-Zammit making the 53-man roster today?
Yeah, that's tough. I would be surprised, to be honest. I want him to. I would really be happy because it's such a great story. It's been fun to watch and write about, and he's seems like a genuinely great guy. And I do think if it ends up being a situation where they cut him, that some other team's probably going to claim him on waivers or something and just take a shot on him. But I have a hard time seeing this player who has never played football in his career coming in and just finding a role based on sheer athleticism without really necessarily knowing and learning the game. I think that he certainly presents some interesting things, right? His ability to do kickoffs as a returner and a kickoff specialist, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of unique. The fact that he's kind of got the skill set of a receiver and a running back, that's kind of unique. I don't know if there's that one singular role for him on the team where you're like, okay, we need to keep this guy on the roster. I feel like some of these guys who have been playing the game for years and years are just going to beat him out on that. And I don't think there's anything to be, upset about with that. I think that, that Reece Sammet realized that this was going to take some time, and I think that the Chiefs kind of sold him that, hey, we have these ideas, and we're going to see what happens and what works, and maybe something clicks during the during the preseason, and he makes himself indispensable. But right now, I don't think he's quite there yet.
Yeah, that's fair. Although I know we're all obviously rooting for it to happen because I mean it would be extremely cool and extremely fun. One more for you, Charles, before we let you go. And you kind of touched on this already too. I mean, you're just doing an incredible job of anticipating where we want to take this conversation, which is great. But if you had to pick a younger player to break out this season based purely on what you've heard over the last 3 or 4 months, just kind of off-season chatter and what you're hearing, within the building, who would it be? And obviously, I'm leaving this a little bit open-ended. Younger player could be a lot of different guys, but your potential options here could include FAU, Felix Anudike Uzama. It could include Sky Moore or Kadarius Toney, who you both mentioned, Najee Johnson, Wanye Morris. I might even be willing to let you pick Jamari Connor, even though he played quite a bit last year. But obviously somebody that, probably will see an increased role. Is there a guy that kind of sticks out to you?
Can I give you three? I have three in
Yes.
mind. Okay,
Yes,
cool.
please.
Yes.
That's a
Okay,
good sign.
Okay, I'll give you three. I'll start on defense. I think Brian Cook coming back from his ankle injury. I've heard great things. We saw what he's capable of. I think early last season, I think he was on his way to having a breakout season. But obviously, the unfortunate injury, I think it happened. Was it Green Bay? I don't remember what game it was. I think it was week 13-ish.
That
So
sounds right.
yeah. And I think he's someone who has the potential to emerge to not just be a consistent playmaker, but like a household NFL name, someone who's regarded as, we're talking about a top 10 list of safeties in the NFL. Okay, Brian Cook's going to be on it. That's the type of things I've heard and have kind of seen in this kind of comeback that he's got going on this year. And I think, we talk about, how do you replace Snead and it being taking a village. I think he's going to be part of that village in the sense that, okay, he can replace some of the ball production in the back end of the secondary. So, I think that's a real exciting one. I heard some very blasphemous things regarding Jared Wiley.
Oh, blasphemous, huh?
Blasphemous. I had asked someone who I know and respect in the building about like kind of like what they've seen from him, and the response to me was Travis who. I'm like
blasphemous in the
like,
Church of Kelsey.
I know,
okay.
man. I'm like,
Wow.
you can't say that about Trav, but like I think Trav would even like go on to say something similar himself, because like
That's fun.
he's already talking about how much further along Wiley is than he was as a rookie, and I think like everyone in the building's kind of seeing like, okay, this guy's ready, like he's ready to go and get involved right away. And I think they're kind of slotting him in at like the Jody Fortson type role.
Oh yeah, sure.
Kind of using him a little bit more in the red zone, and I'm just curious. I'm curious to see what happens. What happens like when he puts the pads on, because he blocking was something that was kind of foreign to him a couple of years ago, because this guy is playing quarterback, right? He's not doing much of that. So if he can emerge as a blocker as well, because we've kind of seen the passing side of it already, I think that he has a chance to be special and quick in this offense, and a big part of it too.
So that
Third
was
guy.
Third guy.
I was going to say,
we got the third guy coming. Nico Remigio. I'm
Okay.
driving.
I hear Remigio as often as I hear Remigio. What is it?
I honestly I couldn't tell you the correct.
I think it's Remigio. I hear that more often.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Remigio. I'll just call him Nico. I think Nico. Just obviously, Matt Nagy is in his corner. Carson Wentz is in his corner. Now you got Dave Toub saying he's the top kick returner for the team.
It's crazy.
I just I feel like this is a guy who's earned a lot of goodwill in that first year of his kind of redshirt season. And I mean, obviously he was like the first guy out there in Texas with Pat this offseason. And I know he worked more with like the second team during mandatory minicamp, but during OTAs he got some opportunities with the ones. And I just think that he's the type of guy that you want on your team, that you can kind of plug him in at a couple different spots, be it special teams, be it on offense, whether or not it's some of the gadget plays or some interesting routes or design plays. I think he has what it takes. And I think it's going to be interesting to kind of see the rest of the wide receiver battle play out around, some of these guys um, who have kind of had that hype these last couple of years, right? Not just Remigio, but like a Justin Ross. Like, can he be a guy to like make a push? Because we've heard praises about him, not a lot this offseason, but he had a couple of touchdown grabs in practice the end of mandatory minicamp there. And once the pads come on, which one of these guys is going to continue to stand out? And right now, I'm putting my money on Nico.
I love it.
Love
So
it.
your three young guys, Brian Cook, Jared Wiley, and Nico Remigio. Well, Charles, great to catch up with you as always. Clearly we have a lot of stuff constantly in Chiefs Kingdom that we need to talk about. So we'll hopefully get you back on the air here before too long. Appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely, always a pleasure to join y'all.